Hello, welcome to Purim. Here we go. I'll let if anybody see some people going to join. All right.
We're just online, so we can be online and we can get squared away. See if anybody comes up.
Yeah.
As long as they see you there.
Yeah.
This is it's just a happening party. So
there's Celinda. Hello. Happy Purim, Celinda. Sheffield's online. We're going to read the Megillah Esther, the scroll, the book, the story of Esther. Yeah. And everything that I was saying that was going to happen a year ago and last summer is now happening.
It's hard to believe and watch.
It's now happening. Things are going exactly like the Torah called it. Just like the Torah called it. And before long, we'll be back on the gold system, and the world will go to it. Everything, like the Gaon of Vilna said, will be 1-to-1 and cross. It
seems like it's all happening.
And Russia will wind up getting that part of Ukraine that they conquered, and they're going to be right there by Istanbul, or what the Gaon of Vilna calls Constantinople. And Hamas is going to be not heard in the land. And I mean, it's just, everything is going just like they planned it. It's amazing.
And there is a lot of rhetoric about Turkey and what's going on with Turkey.
Yep.
So that's going to evolve into the next hot spot.
Yep. And I said the anti-Semitism was going to get out of hand, and just look at it. It's getting
out of hand by the Jews.
It's out of hand, you know. There's
more anti-Semitic.
There's a lot of Jews in New York hate Israel worse than Palestinians do.
Yeah.
Okay, so my margaritas, I made those homemade. They don't have any mix in them. They're just lime and a little hand squeezed lime and hand squeezed OJ and tequila and Grand Gala. So if they're a little tart or a little bitter, that's just because there's no sugar in it. It's no mix. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. But I'd be easy on them. A couple of them. How's it taste?
I don't know what this is. This ain't what you're talking about.
No, that's my water. Got me out of the refrigerator.
Oh, that's something else.
Did you? Yeah, this is something else. This is
But I made margaritas.
Okay. All right. So you got margaritas. I got this. Usually, did you put a shot in this?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Are y'all ready? Are y'all ready to read the story? So anyway, the other day, Russell and I and James, we've been talking about the 320 sparks, right? So one of the issues with certain Orthodox communities, and the reason that they don't accept Gerim Toshav and this and that and the other is because they say that all the 288 sparks are collected. Well, we've been finding sources that's not the case, but we've always claimed that the 320 sparks, the shock sparks, are on the right side, right? And this is what Ravali talks about he doesn't call it the shock or the 320, but he says that the Gerim, the Noga, come from the right side of Hashem, the right arm, so to speak, which is, in the shattering of the vessels, the 320 is the right side. So the shattering of the vessels is the 320 is all the sparks that fell into the lower worlds that have to be redeemed, tikkun, birur, sifted. And so I found a piece that was talking about, and Rav Vali in our study of Jonah has also mentioned correlations with Esther. You know, Nineveh and what happened in Esther, where everybody became Ger and this and that and the other. And so he said that the 320 shock is they add a hay on it, so it's shachah, which is gematria 325 because it puts a hay on it, which is 5, is in Esther 7 verse 10. So when we get there, we'll see what 7:10 is kind of saying, because I haven't looked it up yet. I just read that piece. Right. So anyway, it gave us further, validity is a bad word, but source text that we're on the trail of where do we come from? You know, where's our origin in the world of Nekudim at the showering of the vessels, which is the fall of the kings of Edom.
Right, and that's important that we identify where we're at, even in the primordial world.
Even in the primordial,
the Ger was there.
The Ger was there, right? Yeah, the Ger was there.
In the primordial world?
Yeah.
So I missed that. Where are we there?
Okay, well, we'll have to talk about that one
Get
right
at
on.
7:10. What is it, 17?
At 7:10,
Yeah.
at Esther 7:10, we'll talk about it there. All right. So let's read. Here we go. And it came to pass in the days of Ashurus. He is the Ashurus who reigned from Hudu to Cush. Hudu is modern day Hindu and Cush is modern day Egypt. 127 provinces. In those days, when King Ashurus sat on his royal throne, which was in Shushan, the capital. And in the 3rd year of his reign, he made a feast for all of his servants, the army of Persia and Media. The Media and Persia and Daniel, that's the arms of silver on the Adam Blial, backside Adam. He made a feast for all his officials and servants in the army of Media and Persia, the nobles and the officials of the provinces being present. And when he displayed the riches of his glorious kingdom and the honor of his splendorous majesty for many days, 180 days. And when these days were fulfilled, the king made a 7-day feast for all the people who were present in Shushan, the capital, great and small alike, in the courtyard of the garden of the king's palace. I have some notes here. The courtyard is Asiya. The garden is Yetzirah. The king's palace is Atzilut and Berea. And there, hangings of white fine cotton and turquoise wool, held with the cords of fine linen and purple wool, with silver rods and marble pillars. The couches of gold and silver were on the pavement of the onyx marble, the variegated marble. This is, Ravali says this is onyx. And the drinks were served in golden vessels, vessels from diverse form, the royal wine in abundance, in accordance with the king's wealth. And the drinking was according to the law. And there was no coercion. For so the king had established for every officer in his house to do according to each man's pleasure. Queen Vashti also made a feast for the women in the royal house of King Ashurus. On the 7th day, when the king's heart was merry with wine, he told Mehuman, Bizthea, Harbona, Bigtha, Abigatha, Zethar, and Carcass, the 7 chamberlains who attended King Ashurus, to bring Queen Vashti before the king adorned with the royal crown, to show off to the people and the officials her beauty, for she was beautiful in appearance. But Queen Vashti refused to come, and at the king's command, conveyed by the hand of the chamberlains, the king therefore became very enraged in his wrath and burned him. The king spoke to the wise men, those who knew the times, for such was not the king's procedure to turn to all who knew the law and the judgments, those closest to him. These were the Jews. Karshina, Sethar, Amidatha, Tarshish, Meres, Marsina, and Memucan, the 7 officers of Media and Persia. Actually, it says Persian Media, but sounds better Media Persia. Who had access to the king and who sat first in the kingdom. By the law, what should be done to Queen Vashti for not having obeyed the bidding of King Ahasuerus conveyed by the hand of the chamberlains. Now Memucan, this guy is Haman. There you go. Declared before the king and the officials, not only against the queen has Vashti done wrong, but against all the officials and all the peoples and all the provinces of King Ahasuerus. For the queen's deed will not go forth to for the queen's deed will go forth to all women, making their husbands contemptible in their eyes when they say, King Ahasuerus said to the queen, before Queen Vashti before him, but she did not come. And this day the princes of Persia and Media, who have heard the queen's deed, will speak of it to all the king's officials, and there will be much contempt and rage. If it pleases the king, let there go forth a royal edict from him, and let it be written in the laws of Persia and Media, and it's not to be revoked, that Vashti will never again appear before King Ahasuerus. And let the king confer her royal estate upon another who is better than she. Then the king's decree, which he will proclaim, shall be heard throughout all the kingdom, great though it be, and all the wives will show respect to their husbands, great and small alike. This proposal was favorable in the eyes of the king and the officials, and the king did according to the word of Memucan. And he sent letters to all the provinces, to each province in its own script, to each people in its own language, to the effect that every man should rule in his own home and speak the language of his own people. And after these things, when the wrath of King Ahasuerus subsided, he remembered Vashti and what she had done, and what had been decreed against her. Then the king's attendants said, let there be sought for the king young maidens of beautiful appearance, and let the king appoint commissioners in all the provinces of his kingdoms, that they gather together every young maiden of beautiful appearance to Shushan the capital, to the harem, under the charge of Hegai, the king's chamberlain, the guardian of women, and let their cosmetics be given to them. Then let the girl who pleases the king reign in place of Vashti.
You know, I heard a thing about why it had to be 12 months. Because everything over there stunk. Everything in that time frame stunk. And so it took that long to get that smell out of them to put the good smell into it.
Yeah, and it probably took 12 months just to get the word out and get them back. You know? I mean, if you're ruling from Turkey to Egypt, that's a pretty good camel ride. Mm-hmm. You know?
Then to get the stink out.
Yeah.
Then let the girl who pleased the king reign in Vashti's place. The matter pleased the king, and he did so. There was a Jewish man in Shushan, the capital, whose name was Mordecai. Yay! Son of Jerah, that would probably be Yair, son of Shimei, son of Kish, a Benjamite, who had been exiled from Jerusalem along with the exiles who had been exiled with Jeconiah, the king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had exiled. And he had reared Hadassah. She is Esther, his uncle's daughter, for she had neither father nor mother. The maiden was fine featured and beautiful of appearance. And when her father and mother had died, Mordecai, yay! Adopted her as his daughter. So it came to pass, when the king's bidding and decree were announced, and when many young maidens were being brought together to Shushan the capital under the charge of Hegai, that Esther was taken to the king's palace under the charge of Hegai, guardian of the women. The girl was pleasing in his eyes, and she found favor before him. he hurriedly prepared her cosmetics and her allowance of delicacies to present to her, along with 7 attendants from the king's palace, and he transferred her and her maidens to the best quarters in the harem. Esther had not told of her people or her kindred, for Mordecai, yay! Have a note of the, I think I have the arrow pointing to harem here. It's called Shaddai, like Shaddai. Shaddai. For Mordecai had instructed her not to tell. Day after day, Mordecai, yay! Would walk about in front of the courtyard of the harem to learn and to know about Esther's well-being and what would become of her. Now, when each maiden's turn arrived to come to King Ahasuerus, after having been treating according to the law prescribed for women for 12 months, for so this prescribed length of their anointing was accomplished, 6 months of oil and myrrh and 6 months with perfumes and feminine cosmetics. And then, when the girl came in this manner to the king, she was given whatever she requested to accompany her from the harem to the king's palace. In the evening she would come, and in the morning she would return to the second harem in charge of Shaashgaz, the king's chamberlain, guardian of the concubines. She would never again come to the king unless the king desired her, and she was summoned by name. Now, when the turn came for Esther, daughter of Abihail, uncle of Mordecai, yay! Who had adopted her as her daughter, came to the king, she requesting nothing except which Haggai, the king's chamberlain, guardian of the women, had advised. Esther would find favor in the eyes of all who saw her. Esther was taken to King Ahasuerus into his royal palace in the 10th month, which is the month of Tevez, and in the 7th year of his reign. The king loved Esther more than all the women, and she found favor and kindness before him than all the other maidens. So that he set the royal crown upon her head and made her queen in Vashti's place. Then the king made a great banquet for all of his officers and his servants, and it was Esther's banquet. And he proclaimed an amnesty for the provinces and gave gifts worthy of the king's hand. And when the maidens were gathered together the second time, and Mordecai, yay, sat at the king's gate, Esther still told nothing of her kindred, nor her people, as Mordecai, yay, had instructed her. For Esther continued to obey Mordecai, yay, just as when she was reared by him. In those days, while Mordecai, yay, was sitting at the king's gate, Bigtha and Teresh, two of the king's chamberlains and guardians of the threshold, became enraged and sought to send their hand against King Ahasuerus. The matter became known to Mordecai, who told it to Queen Esther. And Esther informed the king in Mordecai's name. Yay! The matter was investigated and found out to be true. And they were both hanged on the gallows. And it was recorded in the book of Chronicles in the king's presence. And from what I remember, Mordecai wrote a lot of the Chronicles. First Chronicles, Second Chronicles. After these things, King Ahasuerus promoted Haman. Boo!
Boo.
Son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, and elevated him. He set his seat above all the officers who were with him. And the king's servants at the king's gate would bow down and prostrate themselves before Haman. Boo! For so the king had commanded concerning him. But Mordecai, yay! I need another, Mom, would not bow. And he would not prostrate himself. Look, you were right on the money. You could hear the ice rattling, couldn't you? So the king's servants, who were at the king's gate, said to Mordecai, yay! Why do you disobey the king's command? Now, when it happened, when they said this to him day after day, and he did not heed them, and they told Haman, boo! To see whether Mordecai, yay, whether his words would prevail. For he had told them that he was a Jew. Now, when Haman, boo,
But for Mordecai,
himself saw that Mordecai, yay, did not bow down and prostrate himself before him, Haman, boo, was filled with wrath. However, it seemed contemptible to him to send his hand against Mordecai alone. Yay! For they had told him of the people of Mordecai. Yay! So Haman, boo, sought to destroy all the Jews who were throughout the kingdom of Ashurus, the people of Mordecai. Yay! And in the first month, which is the month of Nisan, in the 12th year of King Ashurus, a pur, that is a lot, was cast in the presence of Haman. Boo! From day to day. And from month to month. To the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. Then Haman, boo, said to King Ashurus, there is a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among the peoples in all the provinces in your realm. Their laws are different from every people's. They do not observe the king's laws. Therefore, it is not befitting for the king to tolerate them. We call them anti-Semitics. If it pleases the king, let it be recorded that they be destroyed. Are we seeing that today? And I'll pay 10,000 silver talents into the hand of those who perform these duties. We'll even pay the terrorists to kill the Jews. Imagine that. We'll use USAID.
So surprising they would do something.
Yeah, who would have ever thought that you could pay for terrorism? Must be a brand new thing. And we'll use the deposits of the king's treasuries. The people's money. It's amazing how the story iterates on top of itself. So the king removed his signet ring from his hand and he gave it to Haman. Boo! Son of Hammedatha the Agagite, enemy of the Jews. Then the king said to Haman, boo! The silver is given to you. The people also. Do with as you see fit. The king's scribes were summoned on the 13th day of the month. And everything was written exactly as Haman, boo, had dictated. To the king's satraps and to the governors and to Newsom in California and to all those all over the provinces of the governors and to all the officials and every people, to the province in its own script and to each people in its own language. And it was written in the name of King Ashurus. And it was sealed with the king's signet ring letters were sent by couriers to all the provinces of the king to destroy, slay, and exterminate all the Jews, from young to old, children, women, in one day, on the 13th day of the 12th month, which was probably Friday the 13th, which was in the month of Adar, and to plunder their possessions. Copies of these documents were put out by CNN. Were put out and promulgated in every province, and would be published to all the people by the New York Post, for them to be prepared for that day. Then the couriers went forth and hurried by the order of the king, and the edict was distributed in Shushan, in the capital. Then the king and Haman, boo, sat down to drink. But the city of Shushan was bewildered. Chapter 4. Now Mordecai, yay, had learned of all that had been done. And Mordecai, yay, tore his clothes and donned sackcloth and ashes. That's an indication this was Yom Kippur. And he went down in the midst of the city, and he cried a loud and bitter cry. And it came until the front of the king's gate, for it was forbidden to enter the king's gate in a garment of sackcloth. And in every province, in every place of the king's command and his decrees extended, there was a great mourning among the Jews, fasting, weeping, lament. Sackcloth and ashes were spread out for the masses. And Esther's maidens came, as well as her chamberlains, and told her about it. And the queen was greatly distressed. And she sent garments to clothe Mordecai, yay, to remove his sackcloth from upon him, but he would not accept them. Now Esther summoned Hathach. This is Daniel the prophet, one of the king's chamberlains, whom had stationed before her, and ordered him to go to Mordecai, yay, and learn what this was about and why. We just read that in Jonah. The guys wanted to know what the storm was about and why. So Daniel, Hathach, went out to Mordecai, yay, to the city square, which was in front of the king's gate. And Mordecai, yay, told him all about what had happened. And all about the summons, the sum of money that Haman, boo, had promised to pay from the slush fund of the taxpayers to the royal treasuries for the annihilation of the Jews. He also gave him a copy of the text of the decree that was distributed in Shushan for their destruction, so that he might show it to Esther and inform her, and bid her to go to the king and implore him to plead with him for her people. Hathach, which Daniel, came and told Esther the words of Mordecai. Yay! Then Esther told Hathach and ordered him to return to Mordecai, saying, all the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces know that any man or woman who approaches the king in the inner court, who is not summoned, his law is one to be put to death, except for the one to whom the king extends the golden scepter, so that they may live. Now, I have. Anytime you see a double I, now I, comma, I have, that word's ani. That's the Shekinah speaking. Ani, comma, ani. That's the Shekinah. Now, I have been summoned to come to the king. I have not been summoned to the king for the past 30 days. they related Esther's words to Mordecai. Then Mordecai said to the reply of Esther, don't imagine in your soul that you will be able to escape in the king's palace any more than the rest of the Jews. For if you persist in keeping silent, at a time like this, relief and deliverance will come to the Jews from another place, while you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether it is just a time such as this that you will attain your royal position. Then Esther replied to Mordecai, yay! Go, assemble all the Jews that are found in Shushan. Fast for me. Do not eat, drink for 3 days, night or day. Now, this next phrase here, I have underlined. Ravali says it's called Oved Chain, which is Gematria 72. This is a 72 name of God. And this is what she says. And I with my maidens will fast also. That's the name of 72 name. Thus I will come to the king, though it is unlawful, and if I perish, I perish. Mordecai, yay! Then left and did exactly as Esther had commanded him. Chapter 5. Now, came to pass on the 3rd day, Esther donned royalty and stood in the inner court of the king's palace, facing the king's palace, while the king was sitting on his royal throne in the royal palace, facing the entrance of the palace. There sure is a lot of palace talking right there, right? When the king noticed Queen Esther standing in the courtyard. Remember, we said the courtyard was, the palace is absolute, the courtyard is Asiya. This is all the dimensionality playing out. When the king noticed Esther standing in the courtyard, she found favor in his eyes. And the king extended to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. And Esther approached and touched the tip of the scepter. The king said to her, what is it for you, O Queen Esther? And what is your petition? Even if it be half of the kingdom, it shall be granted to you. This was his Ger moment. Because he just sided with her. Right?
Not the anti-Semite.
He, whatever she wanted, your people are my people. Right? That's a Ruth statement. Right? This is his Ger moment. Because they have Darius, who let them build the temple. This is it. The king said to her, what is it for you, O Queen Esther, and what is your petition? Even if it be until half the kingdom, it shall be granted to you. Esther said, if it pleases the king, let the king and Haman, boo, come today to the banquet that I have prepared for him. Then the king commanded, hasten Haman, boo, to fulfill Esther's word. So the king and Haman, boo, came to the banquet that Esther had prepared. Then the king said to Esther during the wine feast, what is your request? It shall be granted to you. And what is your petition? Even if it be until half the kingdom, it shall be fulfilled. So Esther responded and said, my request and my petition, if I have found favor in the king's eyes, and if it pleases the king to grant my request and fulfill my petition, let the king and Haman, boo, come to the banquet. That one's a little tough there, baby. Maybe a little Coke next time. Then let the king and Haman come to the banquet that I shall prepare for them. And tomorrow, may need a little Coke in that one. Oh yeah, that's really going to help. What, you bring an eyedropper full of coke? That I shall prepare for them, and tomorrow I shall fulfill the king's word. That day, Haman, boo! How's that queso, dude?
Good.
Good? I made that walk too. Made it with love.
You can tell.
Huh? Good, good. Went out joyfully and exuberant. But when Haman, boo! Notice Mordecai in the king's gate, and that he did not stand up, and he did not stir before him. Haman, boo, was filled with wrath at Mordecai. Yay! Nevertheless, Haman, boo, restrained himself and went home. And he sent and summoned his friends and his wife, Zeresh. And Haman recounted to them the glory of his wealth, and all of his many sons, and all the ways in which the king had promoted him and elevated him above all the officials and the royal servants. And Haman, boo, said, moreover, Queen Esther brought no one but myself to accompany the queen to this banquet. And she, that's good, babe, that she had prepared. And tomorrow, too, I am invited by her along with the king. Now, this next quote, you have a Hebrew, we call it a Rosh Teva, where you use the first letter of each word, right? The first letter of each of these words, Hashem's name is Yud Hey Vav Hey, right? So backwards, it's Hey Vav Hey Yud. So the Rosh Teva of this next phrase is Hey Vav Hey Yud. Backwards. Front side, back mirror. Front side, back side. And here's what it says. Yet all this is worth nothing to me. That's the phrase. That's the back. All of this is worth nothing to me. So long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the gate. So his wife Zeresh, as well as all his friends, said to him, let them make gallows 50 cubits high, and in the morning speak to the king, and have them hang Mordecai. Yay! Have them hang him on it.
Mordecai? Oh, yay!
Oh, there you go, Teresa. Teresa. Hey, Teresa. Teresa's first one out. We win. Normally it's mom. Mordecai's supposed to be booing. Then accompany the king to the banquet in good spirits. This suggestion pleased Haman. Boo! And he had the gallows made. This is my favorite verse, maybe in all of Torah. Verse 6, chapter 1. I use it all the time. That night, the king's sleep was disturbed. This is when Adam wakes up. This happens every time the deliverance of the Jews happens. Adam comes out of his dormita, his sleep. You know, when Adam wakes up, that's Zeranpin, Zah. When Zah wakes up, get out of the way. Get out of the way. There's nothing you can do. That night, the king's sleep was disturbed. So he commanded to bring the book of records, the Chronicles, that they be read before the king. And it was found written there that Mordecai had denounced Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's chamberlains of the guardians of the threshold, who sought to send their hand against King Ahasuerus. He remembered that they tried to kill him and that Mordecai saved him. what happened. Then the king said, what honor or majesty has been done for Mordecai? Yay! For this. In other words, he woke up and he goes, didn't this Mordecai guy save my life? Has anything been done for him? The king's attendants and ministrants said, nothing has been done for him. The king said, who is in the courtyard? Now Haman, we're just coming into the outer courtyard of the royal palace to speak to the king about hanging Mordecai on the gallows. Boo! Yay! I'm out. I'm out. On the gallows to be prepared for him. So here's the situation. King was woken from his sleep. Whatever happened to the guy that saved my life? Nothing has been done to him. And all of a sudden, Haman's walking in, telling the king, we're going to hang Mordecai. That's a bad problem. That's a bad problem.
Bad timing.
Bad timing. So the king said to him, behold, Haman, boo, stands in the courtyard. King said, let him enter. Haman, boo, entered. And the king said to him, what should be done for the man whom the king desires to honor? Now, Haman's thinking he's talking to him. But he's talking about Mordecai that saved his life first time. Now, Haman said in his heart, whom the king especially wants to honor more than me. So Haman, said to the king, for the man whom the king desires to honor, have them bring royal attire that the king has worn, and a horse upon which the king is ridden, and with a royal crown placed on his head. Sort of like this one. Then let the attire and the horse be given over to the hand of one of the king's most noble officials, and let the dress of the man whom the king desires to honor, have him ride on the horse throughout the city square, and let them proclaim before him, this is what shall be done for the man whom the king desires to honor. Then the king said to Haman, boo! Hurry, take the attire and the horse, just as you have said, and do all this for Mordecai the Jew. Yay! Who sits at the king's gate. Do not admit a single detail that you have suggested. So Haman, took the garment and the horse and dressed Mordecai, and had him ride through the city square and proclaim before him, this is what shall be done for the man whom the king desires to honor. Mordecai, returned to the king's gate. But Haman, hurried home, despondent, with his head covered. Haman, told his wife Zeresh and all his friends everything that happened to him. And his wise men and his wife Zeresh said to him, if Mordecai, before whom you have begun to fall, is of Jewish descent, you will not prevail against him, but will undoubtedly fall before him. While they were still talking to him, the king's chamberlains arrived, and they hurried to bring Haman, to the banquet which Esther had prepared. So the king, they were having fajitas and queso, pretty sure of it,
I know.
and margaritas. So the king and Haman, came to the feast with Queen Esther. The king asked Esther again on the second day of the wine feast, "What is your request, Queen Esther? It shall be granted to you. And what is your petition? Even if it be until half the kingdom, it shall be fulfilled." So Queen Esther responded and said, "If I found favor in your eyes, O king, and if it pleases the king, let my life be granted to me as a request, and my people as my petition. For we have been sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be slain, and to be exterminated. Had we been sold as slaves and as maidservants, I would have kept quiet. For the adversary is not worthy of the king's damage." Thereupon King Ahasuerus exclaimed and said to Queen Esther, "Who is this?" Who, me, is this Zot? That's Ima and the Shekhinah. Who is this? Right? In the Hebrew. "Where is the one who dared to do such a matter?" This is a big statement. Honey, getting low on oil. Esther said, "A man who is an adversary and an enemy. This wicked Haman." Boo! Haman trembled in terror before the king and queen. The king arose in his wrath from the wine feast, and he went into the palace garden, while Haman, boo, remained to beg Queen Esther for his soul. Isn't that interesting? He didn't beg for his life. He begged for his soul. That's a whole different thing. For he saw that evil had been determined against him by the king. When the king returned from the palace garden to the hall of the wine feast, Haman, boo, had fallen onto the couch upon which Esther was. So the king exclaimed, "Would he actually assault the queen while I'm in the house?" As soon as the king uttered this, they uncovered Haman's face. Boo! Then Harbona, now if I remember correctly, Harbona may be Eliyahu, if I remember correctly. I'd have to look that up, but I believe this may be a little bit of Eliyahu. Then Harbona, one of the chamberlains in attendance before the king, said, "Furthermore, the gallows which Haman made for Mordecai, who spoke good for the king, is standing in Haman's house. And it's 50 cubits high." There's a lot of 50s in Torah, and there's no coke in that rum. And the king said, "Hang him on it." So they hanged Haman. Thank you, Mama.
I know on purpose to make her get up again.
Hang him on the gallows.
So they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. Yay! And the king's anger was abated. That very day, King Ahasuerus gave the estate of Haman, the enemy of the Jews, to Queen Esther. Mordecai, came before the king. For Esther had told the king what he was to her. And the king removed his signet ring, which he had taken away from Haman. And he gave it to Mordecai. Yay! And Esther put Mordecai, in charge of Haman's estate. Boo! Esther yet again spoke to the king. She fell at his feet and wept and implored to him to avert the evil intention of Haman the Agagite. Boo! And his scheme that he had plotted against the Jews. The king extended the golden scepter to Esther. And Esther arose and stood before the king. She said, if it pleases the king, and if I have found favor before him, honey, you never talk to me like this. Never. No, Russell, do you get words like this? No. If it pleases you, my king. I don't ever get. I got a crown. I got the whole thing. I don't ever get it. I never get like this. Never. And the king extended the golden scepter to Esther, and Esther arose and stood before the king. Listen to this, Russell. She said, if it pleases the king, and if I have found favor before him, and if the proposal seems proper before the king, and if I am pleasing in his eyes, let it be written to countermand these dispatches, the scheme of Haman. Boo! The son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, in which he had written to exterminate the Jews who are in all the king's provinces. For how can I bear to witness the disaster which will befall my people? How can I bear to witness the extermination of my kindred? Then King Ahasuerus said to Queen Esther and to Mordecai the Jew, hey! Behold, Hine, that's Gematria 60. That's always a Metatron statement. I have given Haman's estate to Esther. Boo! And they have hanged him on the gallows because he sent his hand against the Jews. You may write concerning the Jews whatever is favorable in your eyes in the name of the king, and seal it with the king's signet. For an edict which is written in the king's name and sealed with the king's signet may not be revoked. So they summoned the king's scribes at that time, in the 3rd month, which was the month of Sivan, in the 23rd day. And it was written as Mordecai had dictated to the Jews and to the satraps and to the governors and officials of the provinces from Hudu to Cush, 127 provinces, to each province in its own script, in the 70 languages, and to each people of its own language, and to the Jews in their own script and language. And he wrote in the name of King Ahasuerus, and he sealed it with the king's signet. And he sent dispatches and couriers on horseback, riders, swift mules, bred mares, to the effect that the king had given permission to the Jews in every city to organize and to defend themselves, to destroy, slay, and exterminate every armed force of any people or province that threatened them, along with their children, women, and to plunder their possessions. On one day, in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, namely the 13th day of the 12th month, that is, the month of Adar. Copies of this document were promulgated to every province to be published to all peoples, for the Jews to be prepared for that day to avenge themselves on their enemies. The couriers, riders of swift mules, went forth in urgent haste by the word of the king. And the edict was distributed in Shushan, the capital. And Mordecai left the king's presence clad in royal apparel of turquoise and white, with a large gold crown and a Rolling Stone t-shirt and a robe of fine linen and purple. Then the king of Shushan was cheerful and glad. The Jews had light and gladness, joy and honor in every province and every city and every place where the king's word and his decree reached. The Jews had gladness and joy, a feast and a holiday. Moreover, many from among the people of the land professed themselves Jews. Gerim Day.
Yeah. Profess themselves.
Professed themselves.
They converted themselves.
They converted themselves.
Jerry.
For the fear of the Jews had befallen them. Then, in the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, on its 13th day, when the king commanded the edict were about to be enforced, and on the day of the enemies of the Jews expected to prevail over them, it was turned about. The Jews prevailed over their adversaries. The Jews organized themselves in their cities and all their provinces of King Ahasuerus and sent forth their hand against those who sought their hurt. And no man could stand before them, for fear of them had befallen upon all the peoples. And all the officials of the provinces, the satraps, the governors, and all those that conducted the king affairs, exalted the Jews for the fear of Mordecai had fallen upon them. For Mordecai was now preeminent in the royal palace. Sounds like the story of Joseph, doesn't it? And his fame was spreading throughout the provinces. For the man Mordecai grew increasingly greater. And the Jews struck all their enemies with the stroke of the sword, slaughtering, annihilating, and treating their enemies as they pleased. In Shushan the capital, the Jews slew and annihilated 500 men and the 10 sons of Haman. I'm not going to read these people's names because they're stupid. And the sons of Haman, boom! And their 10 sons they killed. The Jews, the enemies of the Jews. And they did not lay their hands on the spoils. The same day, the number of those killed in Shushan, the capitals, were reported to the king. The king said to Queen Esther, in Shushan, the capital, the Jews have slain and annihilated 500 men, as well as the 10 sons of Haman. Boom! What had they done in the rest of the king's provinces? What is your request? It shall be granted to you. What is your petition further? It shall be fulfilled. Esther replied, if it pleases the king, let tomorrow also be given to the Jews who are in Shushan to act as they did today. And let Haman, boom, let his 10 sons be hanged on the gallows. The king ordered that this be done. And a decree was distributed in Shushan, and they hanged Haman's 10 sons. Whoa! Now the Jews that were in Shushan assembled again on the 14th day of the month of Adar and slew 300 in Shushan. But they did not lay their hands on the spoils. The rest of the Jews that were in the king's provinces assembled and defended themselves, gained relief from their foes, slaying 75,000 of their enemies. But they did not lay their hands on the spoils. And on the 13th day of the month of Adar, they gained relief. And on the 14th day is a day of feasting and gladness. But the Jews that were in Shushan assembled on both 13th and the 14th day, and they gained relief on the 15th day, making it a day of feasting and gladness. Therefore, Jewish villagers who lived in unwalled towns celebrated on the 14th of the month of Adar as an occasion of gladness, feasting, and festival, for sending delicacies to one another, and nachos, and guacamole, and queso, We call it Purim down here in Texas. Now Mordecai, yay, recorded all these events and sent letters to all the Jews who were in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, the near ones, the distant ones, charging them to observe annually the 14th of the month of Adar and its 15th day, as the days in which the Jews gained relief from their enemies, and the month which had been turned about for them from one day of sorrow to gladness, from mourning to festival, to observe them as the days of feasting and gladness, sending delicacies to one another, gifts to the poor. The Jews undertook to continue that which had begun, just as Mordecai had prescribed. Yay!
Way to go, Mordecai.
For Haman, boo, son of Hammedatha the Agagite, enemy of the Jews, had plotted to annihilate the Jews and cast a pur, that is a lot. Did we? Yeah, we booted. To terrify and to annihilate them. But when she appeared before the king, he commanded by means of the letter that Haman, boo, that his wicked scheme, which had been devised against the Jews, should recoil upon his own head. Let this be a lesson. And they hanged him and his sons on the gallows. Therefore, they call these days Purim. For the word pur is the essence of the matter. That's the lot. Therefore, because of all this that was written in this letter, and because of what they had seen concerning this, and what has happened to them, the Jews confirmed and undertook upon themselves and their posterity, and upon all those who might join with them, without fail, to observe these 2 days in their prescribed manner and in their proper time each year. And these shall be remembered and celebrated in every generation, every family, every province, every city. These are the days of Purim, and should never cease among the Jews, nor shall their remembrance perish from their descendants. Then Queen Esther, daughter of Abihail, wrote, along with Mordecai the Jew, with full authority to ratify the second letter of Purim. Dispatches were sent to all the Jews, to the 127 provinces of the kingdom of the Ahasuerus, with words of peace and truth, shalom and emet, to establish these days of Purim on their proper dates, just as Mordecai, the Jew, and Queen Esther had enjoined them, and as they confirmed upon themselves and their posterity the manner of the fast and lamentations. Esther's ordinances confirmed these regulations of Purim, and it was recorded in the book. Chapter 10. This is the smallest chapter in the book because the 10th Sphirot, because there's 10 chapters in this book, is the Malchut, which had nothing of its own. Therefore, it's the smallest chapter. That's why the 9th chapter is the longest, because it's just so. King Ahasuerus levied a tax upon the mainland and the islands of the sea, and all his mighty and powerful acts, and the account of the greatness of Mordecai. Yay! Whom the king promoted, or recorded in the book of Chronicles, the kings of Media and Persia. Isn't it odd that they switch it from Media the first two times it's written, it says Persian Median. Then the last time it's written, it says Median Persian. Guarantee you there's something there. For Mordecai, the Jew was viceroy, which means second in command. This kind of sounds like Joseph. Was second in command to King Ahasuerus. He was a great man among the Jews and found favor with the multitude of brethren, all the Garim and other Jews. And he sought the good of his people and spoke for the welfare of all his seed. And the Torah is amazing, and the Megillah Esther is amazing, and happy Purim, and we'll see you next time. I've got a lot of stuff already done for Jonah, but next week I'm going fishing. We'll see you the week after. Have a great Purim, everybody. Glad you could join us for the reading of Esther.